Tonight on CTV News, the bus exchange is nearly finished, but who will be paying for it? Wanting faster broadband in Christchurch? Well, you might be waiting a few more years. And the fight for justice for Peter Ellis intensifies.
Broadcasting across Canterbury, from the CTV studio, this is First at 5.
Good evening. The first major anchor project from the government's controversial blueprint is almost complete. The bus exchange has been months in the making, and while some city leaders are applauding the building, others are expressing concern that the public remains in the dark over the ongoing operational costs. Here's Marcus Gibb.
It's a $101 million development and it's only weeks away from opening. But as the finishing touches are added, a Christchurch City councillor says there are still questions about the bus interchange that the government has failed to answer.
We still have no clarity about who's actually going to own it.
The government and council are sharing the cost of turning the blueprint into a reality. The Crown will pay $2.9 billion, while another $1.9 billion of work will be covered by the council. The council's paying $40 million to build the bus interchange, and the Crown's covering the rest. In August last year, the interchange was set for an April opening, but now we're only a week out from May, and its opening date still hasn't been announced. Johansson told Chris Lynch during the filming of CTV's Lynched that he was concerned over the lack of information available on the project. He's demanding Sarah answers questions over the project's future viability.
So we've got a major facility that's been built, ready to open in a few weeks, and we don't even know as a city who's going to own it, who's going to operate it. I think that's pretty concerning.
In a statement, a Sarah spokesperson says the future ownership of the bus interchange is still not known. He says initially the Crown will own the bus interchange and will provide for facilities management such as cleaning and security. Environment Canterbury will operate bus services out of the facility and will staff those operations, but the future arrangements for the facility are still to be determined. The spokesperson says these ownership and management arrangements have been the subject of numerous discussions between Sarah, the City Council, ECAN and the New Zealand Transport Agency. Meanwhile, Johansson says the interchange should have been merged with Community House, with non-profit groups working out of the top floor.
A huge amount of money has been spent on building it without any strategic thinking, I think, as to what is its future life and future purpose.
The bus interchange example is just one of what he's calling several anchor project failures. Another is the alteration of plans for the green space in the CBD. It was originally pitched as a green frame bordering the city centre, but its purpose has since changed.
Things like the southern frame, which was supposed to be a major cycleway and green corridor, no longer going to be the case. You look at the eastern frame, that's going to be full of residential, so the nice green picture that people saw when the blueprint was announced is not really what's going to happen there.
The timelines for the anchor projects have been updated several times since the blueprint was announced in 2012. Since then there have been a number of delays, but it looks like the bus interchange will open in a matter of weeks, but the question still remains, who will own it? Marcus Gibbs, CTV News.
And property developer Anthony Goff is clashing over claims of international investment following the Mayor's trip to China this month. Leon Dalzell says the potential for foreign investment in this city is growing, but Anthony Goff says that's rubbish.
Some are calling it a waste of ratepayers' money. Others say it's an opportunity to enhance the city's relationship with China. This month's Sister City trip was certainly controversial, with the Mayor back in her seat now and Leon Dalzell hailing the trip as a success. Celebrating 30 years of Sister City relations, the Mayor and two city councillors flew to China to visit Gansu and Wuhan, two of Christchurch's sister cities. The Mayor's talks with China's leaders was partly focused on education and tourism. However, it seems the Mayor was more interested in potential investment opportunities in Christchurch that China's leaders could tap into.
The scale of what we have to achieve and the limitations on everyone's budgets. I mean, there just isn't an endless pool of money. There is significant interest in creating investment opportunities over here.
Mayor Dalzell believes foreign investors are important for Christchurch's rebuild, and she's confident developers are already planning to build here.
There absolutely is interest in investing in Christchurch, but certainly the feedback that we got was that it didn't seem obvious where the investment opportunities would lie. And so, you know, as a council, we've been having discussions about how we create a single point of entry for investment.
However, a prominent Christchurch developer says there isn't interest from any overseas investors when it comes to the region's rebuild.
The Chinese and Japanese and Koreans, they haven't pulled their wallets out and started spending money. They keep saying they're going to, but they're sitting around doing nothing.
And he says it's likely investors won't be throwing cash around anytime soon.
You know, we haven't rushed off to Japan where they had a tsunami and the nuclear fallout. Why would you? We don't know the sentence, so why do they expect overseas people? It's not going to happen. Hey, in 10 years' time, yes, but not now.
However, Sarah recently told CTV News international investors are in talks behind the scenes. When pressed on why it's taken so long for international investors to arrive on our shore, after all, the earthquake was more than 4 years ago, Mayor Dalzell told me until now the council has been focusing on its day-to-day business. But with the long-term plan nearly out of the way, she says councillors want to start working to pull international investors into the city and keep them here.
We've got tied up in the long-term plan and the district plan review and all of these things, and we've actually just finally got to the point where we have to say, look, we can't wait. We actually have to get on with the job of creating that single point of entry into the city and just see what happens.
And she says it's the way forward for the city.
There's a lot going on in Christchurch, but in order to get the scale of momentum that we need, I think we need external assistance, and finding a mechanism for bringing that external opportunity into the city itself, I think would be a great advantage.
With the City Council now finishing up consultation on the long-term plan, tracking down international investors will be at the top of these councillors' agendas, with discussions kicking off in the council chamber next week. Jared McCulloch, CTV News.
Well, it could be the biggest illegal shellfish haul ever seen in this country. 8 people have been caught with more than 10,000 stolen cockles near the Ashley River, and the government is encouraging the public to dob in other offenders.
Waikuku Beach was the scene of a major bust for MPI staff this week when more than 10,000 cockles were stopped from being taken by a band of 8 men. The daily limit for recreational cockle gathering in Canterbury is only 150 per person. The 8 people involved had been gathering the seafood where the Ashley River meets the sea when MPI compliance officers received a tip-off about the major haul. The Ministry for Primary Industries seized 2 vehicles in the raid. 4 large sacks of cockles were found in one car and 5 large sacks in another. MPI staff say it may have been the largest illegal haul in New Zealand for many years. They're happy with the tip-off and are encouraging people to dob offenders in. The restrictions are in place as shellfish beds can't handle the sort of pressure. Staff say it's a fisher's obligation to know the rules for the area they're fishing in.
Well, still to come here on CTV News, Peter Ellis's strongest supporter and award-winning writer, Linley Hood, joins me to discuss his next legal battle. Hi, I'm Chris Lynch. Join me every Monday at 8:30 on CTV as we discuss the issues affecting you, your family and everything to do with Canterbury. That's CTV 8:30 right here.
Computer not working? Replace or repair? DIY or get a technician? Looking for parts? Thinking of upgrading? Need accessories? You've got questions, we've got answers. Global PC.
Preparation, the devotion, the fearlessness, the intensity. Runway model management. First impressions are everything.
made for you.
Join Graham Sinclair and the team at Gone Fishing as they bring you great stories, fishing tips and beautiful scenery. Gone Fishing, Friday night at 8:30, right here on CTV.
Well, as you'll know, earlier this week, Peter Ellis and once again the government said no to any kind of Royal Commission of Inquiry, or not even that, just another inquiry opening up this case because of the police evidence and how it was handled. You'll know the author, Lindley Hood, wrote an award-winning book called A City Possessed. It won awards and raised more questions than answers about the handling of the case. And Lindley is with us in the studio. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
Thanks so much for coming here to CTV News. First up, and this is quite interesting, you were telling me off air that it wasn't so much you were a great supporter of Peter Ellis in the beginning, it was more so the fact you decided to write a book, and as you were writing this book, it raised more questions than answers. Tell us about that process.
Well, issues that divide communities fascinate me, because both sides can't be right. So where does the truth lie? And my two previous books, one about Sylvia Ashton-Warne and one about Minnie Dean, both looked at all the arguments for and against and just found a way through and left people to make up their own mind. When I was well into researching A City Possessed, and normally I would write up a book of both sides are valid from their point of view, dear reader, make up your own mind. And I did put both sides of view in the book, but I couldn't pretend that, you know, I reached a point where I thought, this is totally nuts.
Do you remember that defining moment where when you were researching the book and writing the book and you thought, this is nuts? Do you remember that moment?
Pretty much, yes.
Explain it to me.
I'd have to go back. It was to do with the first allegation, which it was just very strange and airy-fairy and rather meaningless. And the cop who took it seemed very excited about it and wrote in his report, he is apparently a homosexual. So he was obviously regarded that as a serious matter.
Do you believe, and we discussed this a lot on News Talk CB the other day, moral panic? Did that play a massive part in the downfall of Peter Ellis?
Yes, huge. I mean, when I was writing a book about Minnie Dean, people said to me it was a witch hunt. And I thought, well, what is a witch hunt? And I looked at the witch hunts of the 16th and 17th centuries, and there were stories of satanic rituals and baby eating and all these things. And then suddenly, here are these stories of satanic rituals and baby eating at the Civic crash. So I thought, oh wow, I can study a witch hunt up firsthand.
Why is it then, do you think, that despite the fact this case went through the legal process, Peter Ellis was still convicted? He was still found guilty of these crimes.
Because when you get a moral panic, judges and juries and prosecutors and the general public are not exempt. They all think they're behaving rationally, but their moral compasses become so disoriented that they end up doing harm when they think they're doing good.
Lily, for those perhaps unfamiliar with the case, and I suppose there probably won't be many that won't be familiar with this case, you talk about the first allegation being almost laughable in a way because it's so shocking. Is that the allegation regarding the colour of Peter Ellis's genitals?
Yes, yeah.
Because it was overheard that Peter Ellis had a black penis.
The child allegedly said this. I mean, we don't even know what Peter he was talking about, if he did say that. But he had a mother, the child who allegedly made that allegation, and he never repeated it in an interview with they had these tape-recorded interviews and the kids were interviewed within an inch of their lives, but that child never repeated that. So whether the mother invented it or whether the child said it, and what it meant and what Peter he was talking about, given that there was a dark-skinned Peter in the child's life.
What do you say to those who would suggest this has been through the court process, he's been convicted, give it up? What do you say to those people?
Well, there's plenty of evidence from other cases that our justice system makes mistakes, that it's unable to self-correct. I think one of the most egregious convictions, which was that Peter Ellis was convicted of being party to an offence committed by an unknown man in an unknown time and place. Now, not only did the jury convict him, that was upheld by 2 courts of appeal and a ministerial inquiry.
Hang on. So that doesn't make sense. How can you be convicted of an unknown what? Location?
Of being party to an offence committed by an unknown man at an unknown time and place.
Well, how does that make sense?
It doesn't make sense. But, I mean, even Sir Thomas Eichelbaum could find nothing wrong with the process. So
I was speaking to Peter Ellis's lawyer the other night, and he was saying to me on the telephone the reason why this continues to be denied by successive governments is because they don't want a bar of anything. It's got children involved, allegedly. It's got the word sex, it's got the word predator, paedophile, you name it. It's too icky for them to deal with. Do you believe there's some truth in that now, knowing what you know?
Oh, it could be. And all the people whose reputations are on the line, they've never had to admit they did anything wrong, and they're determined to keep it that way.
What do you think Peter Ellis's next avenue will be now? Because everyone's questioning why he didn't go through other court processes, but to get to the Privy Council, for argument's sake, is incredibly expensive, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, Arthur Allen Thomas had been to the Privy Council and he'd been to the Court of Appeal 3 times and had several things to the Governor-General. You can go around that endlessly. So it's no good saying he hasn't exhausted his legal options. You've never exhausted your legal option. You can always go back for a royal prerogative of mercy. But when it's so blindingly obvious, and a lot of judges will tell you off the record that it's nuts.
And it almost makes it even more frustrating, doesn't it? Because you've got all these legal professionals saying that off the record, but they can't say it on the record. We're out of time. Lily Hood, nice to meet you, and thank you so much for coming into News Talks. Where are we? CTV News.
Whatever.
We talked to you on News Talks yesterday, that's why. Yeah. Nice to meet you. Well, still to come here on CTV, the week's business news and your region's weather.
With all the latest innovations in the world of technology, Shift has everything you need to stay informed and in the know. Shift, 2:15 on Monday, right here on CTV.
Opus is recreating the heart of Canterbury. From large-scale projects to commercial buildings. Your design, your vision. Opus.
In your life. Colour Steel, the roof of New Zealand.
diversity, no deposit, instant finance, convenience, open 7 days. Austin Motor Company.
Drive It showcases the new arrivals to the motoring world, comparing and testing the latest models to discover which one is the best. Drive It, Sunday afternoons at 2:30, only on CTV.
Welcome back to CTV News. Now here's Warren Head with this week's business report.
I'm Warren Head for headliner.co.nz. Well, today the Reserve Bank was out again talking about inflation. The Assistant Governor, McDermott, gave a speech this afternoon. And really the interesting thing about the bank's position on where we're at is that we know inflation is really low, historically low. So why aren't they cutting their cash rate and getting the interest rates down? Two things here. The bank takes a very long position on these things and is probably thinking that we are going through the start of a really good recovery and we're headed for higher inflation in due course. They don't want to muck it up now. Historically, you know, big countries can get things terribly wrong, which is what happened in the United States not so far back, and everything just exploded and all the values went sky high. The same thing could occur here, I guess, in their view, with housing prices. Too low, the interest rates, and you have a housing boom. Up go the values again, and so it's a bit of a balancing act. So that's what's going on there. There's been a balancing act going on too for the last several years with Kiwi Bank, which of course is now 13 years old. 2002 it came into existence, and the big news there is it's just paid a dividend. It has been running into black for the first time in a very long time. In fact, it's been years and years that it's been really propped up with cash injections from New Zealand Post. And now, of course, the bank's standing on its own 2 feet, and it had a good annual result last year, 100 million, and for the half year to December it was 70 million, so they paid a dividend back. I wonder now whether or not the pressure might come off New Zealand Post, and you start to think about linkages here about some of those NZ Post services which have been cut during this period when they've been propping up Kiwi Bank. So I'm interested to see what happens along those lines. And on the local front, the fibre business Enable, owned by our Christchurch City Council, has reported that their roll past the houses is now up to a customer sign-on of about 10,000 people, growing at a rate of about 200%. This is the ultra-fast broadband going past your home. And they're the people who have been digging up your footpath now for the last many months. And probably more of that to come, but that rollout is probably now about halfway through, and the participation rate, that is the sign-on rate, seems to be best in the new subdivisions, in particular Wigram and Rolleston, where about 35% of homes there are picking up the UFB and hooking on. So they call that the penetration rate. In other parts of town, in the older suburbs, it's down around about 20% in Burnside and Addington and places like that, and Bishopdale. And what we're expecting there is this $440 million project will ultimately reach 380,000 homes. But that means they've got to sign people up as well to get all those fancy things that you can get through UFB. And coming up to the weekend, the government has announced that there's a good thing here for landlords. All the information that landlords need on tenancies and information is on a one-stop site called www.tenancy.government, that's govt.co.nz, I should say, tenancy.government.nz, get it right. And the landlord can hook up there and find out all the things he needs to know. And in closing, Anzac weekend. This week I went looking out for those Anzac coins. Now the new 50-cent coin is an absolute gem, but there's about 1 million of those on issue. But if you go to most of the post shops, you'll find they're selling out fast of the other Anzac coins. They're collector's items. This is the centenary coin sets, and some of them are really rolling out at the stores along with the first day covers. And the gold coin, if you're interested in gold, the Anzac or the WW100 centenary coin, a mint coin of 0.999% pure gold, selling at just on $800. Sorry, all gone, completely sold to collectors around the world. I'm Warren Head for headliner.co.nz.
Thanks, Warren. Now here's your weather.
Good evening, Canterbury. Let's take a look at today's highs. Timaru, you're on 16 today. Temuka and Geraldine, slightly warmer on 17 degrees. Ashburn and Methven, you both shared 16 today. Rikaya, 16 for you. Darfield, Leeston and Rolleston, your high today was 16 degrees. Lincoln and Christchurch, you guessed it, 16. Over in Akaroa today, you're one of the cooler places to be in the region today on 15 degrees. Further north, Kaipoi, Rangiora and Amberley, 16 was your high.
Maybe she thinks I know something. Maybe she thinks it's fine.
Cold in Hanna Springs and Cheviot, you all shared a high of 17 today. Kaikoura, 15 degrees. Let's take a look at tomorrow's weather now. Timaru will be mostly fine and sunny with just some northeasterly breezes. Your overnight low tonight is 8. Tomorrow's high, 17 degrees.
So don't tell me you might just let it go.
As for Ashburn, a fine Friday's in store for you with some long sunny periods throughout the day and northeasterly winds. Tonight's low is 8. Tomorrow's high, 17.
No one likes to be let down.
Let's take a look at Christchurch now. There'll be some breezy northeasterly winds, but there'll be mostly clear skies for you, making way for a great Friday. Tonight's low is 8. Tomorrow's high, 17 degrees.
Sees it with her sleeping eyes, and I know that when she said she's gonna try, well, it might not.
Up in Kaikoura, there'll be mostly fine and sunny weather for you with just some northeasterly breezes here and there. Your overnight low is 8. Tomorrow's high, 17.
I wouldn't want to break on, I wouldn't want to break on. Maybe she'll help me to
Let's take a look at the other areas around the region for tomorrow. Temuka and Geraldine, fine for you, 18. Methven and Rikaya, you both share 17, fine weather for you. Darfield, Leeston, Rolleston and Lincoln expect some clear skies and 17 degrees.
You might just let it.
Over in Akaroa tomorrow, fine day for you all day, 16 degrees. Kaipoi, Rangiora and Amberley, get that washing ready to go. It's going to be a fine day, 17 degrees.
To stand in my way, 'cause no one knows.
Cold in Hanna Springs and Cheviot, very similar picture for you as well. Fine for you, 18.
It seems to me that
Looking ahead for Canterbury now, your Anzac Day will see some northerly winds and high cloud throughout the day. It will be quite mild too. As for Sunday, there will be some thick high cloud with outbreaks of light rain here and there, especially off the western ranges at times, and some fresh, mild northerly winds. And for those of you that will have Monday off, expect some rain here and there. Tuesday is not looking any better. There'll be some rain, but they'll turn to showers with some cold southwesterly winds and snow lowering to 600 metres. And for Wednesday, it'll be mostly cloudy with some showers expected and southwesterly winds. But for now, that is your weather for Thursday.
And that is your bulletin for Thursday. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great night.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.